I should have taken that left turn to Albuquerque. All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance.
Why, again, probably a follow-up question, why do you believe so many Americans continue to believe things which are obviously untrue? Let's try that.
Well, I don't know. Most people I know don't, and I'm sure there are those who do, because they want to believe. It's very comforting to believe. And whether what you believe is true or false, at least you have that belief, and if it makes you feel good and comfortable, and you trust our great leader, then you feel satisfied and at peace. Doesn't make it true. It's just the comfort level some people need. They'll believe anything, and they will not use their critical thinking to evaluate.
I run into a lot of the people who still believe, and again, we started out at a point where 70% of Americans were supporting the war in Iraq, and we have made amazing progress where it has flipped, where about 70% Americans oppose the war in Iraq. But Sheri, why do you think that 30% is hanging in there now?
I'm not sure that George Bush and the administration has actually come out and said we made a mistake and there really isn't anything there. And I think if people would actually hear him admit that he realizes he was wrong, that they might be willing to believe it. But it seems to me that that's part of the reason he can continue doing what he's doing. He hasn't admitted that he's done anything wrong yet, so why should he make any corrective action? Why should he do anything differently with his military plan if everything he's done has been right so far? I think, like Bruce said, we don't want a dictator controlling a vital region. We don't like to believe our own government is doing things that other bad governments around the world do. We like to believe that we can trust our leaders. And I think that's one of the things that I hear a lot, actually, being a peace activist, that you shouldn't question your president in a time of war. And I think that's an insane thing to say. That seems to me, when you don't agree with him, regardless of whether you're at war or not, you need to question, you need to do critical thinking. You need to understand where it came from, where it's going, and everything in between. There's no plan for ending this. There was no plan when they started for any type of resolution. So if we didn't have a plan to end it, it just seems to me like he's perpetuating this, and he doesn't have to explain himself, because all the reasons that he used before that have turned out to be lies, no one seems to be calling him on that. I mean, if we know that what he's doing is illegal, it seems to me that he and Dick Cheney sure have a lot more reason to be impeached than someone who was unfaithful, for example. So I think that's one thing, that people don't want to believe that our government is deceiving us.
That's a good point. Robert, what do you think?
One of my favorite jokes is, what's the difference between Vietnam and Iraq? And the answer was, George W. Bush had a plan to get out of Vietnam.
Excellent.
But, sorry, I can't help myself sometimes. But we go back to the weapons of mass destruction, which were actually weapons of mass distraction. It was keeping people afraid, and Bush was still using that mantra of 9/11, 9/11. And even though actually Bush did it a couple of times admit, well, yeah, okay, we didn't find weapons of mass destruction. But he only said it a couple of times, and it wasn't in any, Fox didn't cover it, I'm sure. So you gotta be careful. But ever since then, he always made sure that he could mention 9/11 and Iraq in the same sentence. He didn't necessarily say we're in Iraq because of 9/11, but he would say it.
Bush and Giuliani.
That's right, and that's the thing. Rudy, right now, you could play a drinking game with Giuliani right now and have a shots out in front of you, and every time he says 9/11, take a shot, you're going to be drunk by the time Giuliani finishes his speech. So, but they became weapons of mass distraction. They kept us looking one way while the country was doing something else. And after Bush said, okay, well, we didn't have any weapons of mass destruction, he still had people believing, well, you know, what happened was they took them into Syria. Yeah, right. We had satellite coverage of this area. We would see anything going into Syria. We didn't see that. But they still believe this, and that's because it was constantly pounded into our heads. 9/11, 9/11, 9/11. And then it became Al-Qaeda. We're not going in because of weapons of mass destruction. I know that's what we said first, but it's like Maxwell Smart on, Maxwell Smart. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, would you believe?
Would you believe?
We're going in because of Al-Qaeda. And then it was, we're going in so we can help establish a democratic government in Iraq. I mean,
that was about the fourth reason, wasn't it?
Right, it kept changing and changing and changing. And it's going to keep changing. But we should never have gone over there to begin with. And I think we're all in agreement on that.
That's one of the reasons we really have to have this. It's just amazing. Like, you know, there's been so many press secretaries. It's hard to remember back to Ari Fleischer and we're at war now. There's no dissent. You know, it's just, that's an incredible moment there. So, Bruce, what do you think about the subject at hand?
Well, another point on that topic is the complicity of the media in selling the war to the American public. They showed all the, you know, we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud coming out of the mouths of the administration, and didn't question when Bush said that Saddam Hussein was seeking significant quantities of uranium from Niger, when the documents that was based on were known by the CIA at the time to be forgeries. So when they make these bold statements, it gets everyone's attention about the dangers that are involved. It's propaganda. And when they retract a statement, which happens very rarely, but once in a while they will say, oh, that was a mistake. And it's very quietly done, and the media does not publicize this near to the extent that the original statement was. So all people remember is the fear of this mushroom cloud, not the fact that they didn't have a bomb to make this mushroom cloud from.
Absolutely. I had World War II veterans, you know, at the start of this, that you're just a fool. Saddam Hussein's going to kill us with nuclear weapons in our sleep, you know. And I was amazed by that, really, and that I really never believed it. And we did have international weapons inspectors. We did march locally from the Allen County Courthouse Green to the federal building with signs that said, "Let the inspectors work." And now this spring we should have 13,400 Hoosiers in Iraq in a few months. It's incredible. So what could we have done? What could the Bush administration have done representing the United States as a country after 9/11 instead of war? Again, really, we're discussing the war, but also we're discussing what we could have done instead of war. Roger, what do you think?
Well, you said instead of war, we could have, and I don't know, this is probably asking way too much.
Instead of Iraq.
We could have found Osama bin Laden, and that is a novel thought, and I hesitate to bring it up, but it seems to me that would have been a really good place to start. The second thing is try to build bridges instead of blow them up. The people who do not like us have reasons they do not like us, and we should try to discover what those reasons are and see what it is in our behavior and their behavior that we can bring ourselves together rather than do what we have done, is push ourselves apart, and like Robert said, we now have more Al-Qaeda and more people angry with us than we did before. So, and the amazing thing is, this would all be so inexpensive compared to the money we've spent now.
Halliburton wouldn't have made us much money, though.
I know, and that's a shame. That's a shame.
Sheri, what do you think there? What are your ideas for something other than the Iraq War?
Well, I think Robert was talking about, you know, there was a lot of goodwill towards the United States after that attack. It showed a lot of vulnerability that a lot of people in our lifetimes have not felt before. And I think that brought a lot of compassion from other places around the world. I think it would have been an ideal time to reach out to other places and have more cohesion and more working together and more, instead of trying to get everybody on our ship to fight this war that we shouldn't be fighting, we should be looking for other ways to make a stronger peacekeeping force. There's no reason we can't still find terrorists, with massive forces of humans, but you don't need tanks and guns, to when you're talking about terror cells. You need more law enforcement, you need more communication, you need people like the FBI and the CIA communicating and working together, and internationally too. Certainly. We've seen in England where they've exposed cells of terrorists and that sort of thing. So if we know that they're out there, instead of expecting everybody to join with us and start blowing people away, we would have done a lot better to reach out to the rest of the world and say, we know these people are out there. This is the information we have about Al-Qaeda. This is the information that we had before the planes flew into New York City. And do a little more, maybe even background information. Apparently there were a lot of warnings that our government should have paid attention to, that some people say might have prevented the attacks at all. So there's a lot more that we could be doing to reach out to people instead of
It's strange to me. They say one of the 9/11 hijackers or someone by that name is actually a graduate of the same school as I am, School of Aerospace Medicine, Brooks Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas, where we train the Iranians, we train the Iraqis, we train, obviously, Saudi Arabians, and we train so many people. And again, many people have the name Mohammed, and the names are very similar. They don't even know. They don't even know. Robert, what do you think on this?
Let's face it, I believe we could get more information for fighting terror by helping feed other nations rather than clubbing them over the head. The old saying, you get more with honey than you do.
Soft power, baby. Soft power.
It's true, though. You win hearts and minds like that. You don't beat them over the head first and go, well, here, let me fix that cut. No. You start off by extending a hand of friendship and helping other people out. Think about how many people around the world we could have fed. Think about how many people here in this country we could have fed. Think of the number of hospitals we could have built. Think of the number of great things we could do with the amount of money that we have spent on this war. It's staggering.
What is it now? What do you think the figure is?
I know this much. The Freedom Tower that they're building on the site of the original, Twin Towers. They have figured so far that we could build more than 54 of those new Freedom Towers. In other words, one per state, and then some more to send around the world.
That'd be something.
Yeah. I mean, not that we'd want to do that, but that's an awful lot of money when you think about how much one of those towers is going to cost. And we should have been doing this a long time ago. And obviously, George W. Bush and his people should have been paying attention to the intelligence rather than believing they were intelligent when they really weren't. So,
Bruce, what do you think on this? What could we have done instead of Iraq? It's over 600 billion, which is really, I remember when we thought 200. No one believed 200 billion, and before the war, people thought that's just ridiculous. How naive we were.
And yet he asked for another 50, 60 billion, every 4 months now, it seems like.
And he gets it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
The first thing I thought when those buildings came down on 9/11 was this is something that should be a police matter. This was done by individuals. Criminals. It's a police matter. And going and bombing Iraq for it would be like bombing Mexico for Pearl Harbor. There was no connection. And those weren't, Japanese Zeros that flew into the Twin Towers. They were airliners. The level of police work that needs to be done, some of it was being done. If you look at the FBI project Able Danger, they were actually monitoring Muhammad Atta before 9/11 and found that he was getting his money from Pakistan. This is something you don't hear about in the evening news.
Definitely 100,000 from a Pakistani general.
Right.
That's incredible. And really, they just make no mention of that. It's kind of embarrassing, so they kind of got left out of the reports.
And going right back to the days right after 9/11, what were we doing letting all of these Saudis leave the country before we had a chance to question them?
Friends of the Bush family.
Every single police officer you talk to says, when there's a crime, one of the first things you do is you talk to members of the family. And yet we knew the next day that Osama bin Laden was behind it, and there were members of the bin Laden family here in the United States. But did the FBI get a chance to question these guys? No. Let's send them back home.
Even though no one else could fly that day.
Yeah, nobody. That's right. All the other planes in the country were grounded, but we still let the Saudis take off.
It is interesting, and actually on 9/11, I walked into eating establishment, and really there was no scale on it. There was obviously a plane had gone into the tower, but you're really thinking, at that time I was thinking a Cessna, and you start looking, it's kind of a clear day, that's kind of odd. And I was actually watching the television as the second plane went into the second tower, and the gentleman having a cigarette while playing the Cherry Master and such said, "What was that?" And I said, "We're being attacked." And after that I said, "This is Arabs. This is someone who's been on the receiving end of Tomahawk missiles." I said this within minutes. So again, it's just something that's not a surprise. People say, "Oh, how could this have happened?" And we were just sitting here minding our own business, and we were attacked. And that really is what people who support the war believe that to this day, that we're totally innocent, we weren't doing anything anywhere, and kind of an amazing attitude there. We want to take a break now. Which one would we like to take a break?
Okay.
We would like to take a break now, and we're going to come back here and continue the show for a second half. And thank you very much.